Hello, New Zealand. Welcome to another episode of Political Playback. And once again, Simon O'Connor is AWOL. He is travelling overseas, and I think he'll be back next Thursday. So we're very fortunate to have a guest panellist who probably needs no introduction. Peter Williams, great to have you on board. I hear we dragged you in from a beautiful day in the garden.
Yes, Central Otago's turned on a fantastic autumn day today. We actually had a wee frost this morning, Bob. I know you don't want a weather report, but it's subsequently developed into one of those delightful Central Otago still blue sky days. Just perfect for work in the garden.
Well, actually, funnily enough, I do want a weather report because I'm supposed to be travelling to a conference in Brisbane tomorrow. And I'm still trying to figure out if
I wouldn't advise it.
No, that's what it seems like, but Air New Zealand doesn't seem to be giving any edict either way. We're still checked in and, yeah, it seems a bit chaotic. But anyway, it looks like I may be stuck in New Zealand. Anyway, if you want to comment, you can go to YouTube, our YouTube account, Family First NZ, and put a comment there, or on our Facebook page, Family First NZ, and that will come right to my computer, and I can see Catherine's watching and a few others, Jackie from Ratahi. So already people on board. We've got a lot to cover, and actually I want to start with the breaking news, Peter, and that is that Goff's off. Phil Goff has been sacked by Winston Peters, and apparently he went into some place called the Chatham Room, and he said this.
Phil Goff, New Zealand High Commissioner. I was rereading Churchill's speech to the House of Commons in 1938 after the Munich Agreement. And he turned to Chamberlain, he said, you had the choice between war and dishonour. You chose dishonour, yet you will have war. President Trump has restored the bust of Churchill to the Oval Office, but do you think he really understands history?
Okay, so that sounded like a bit of a slight towards Trump, which maybe you do as a politician, but not as a diplomat. Peter, what's your take on this?
Oh, precisely. Phil Goff just forgot where he was. The question, I believe, was to either the Finnish foreign minister or to the Finnish diplomat. The funny thing is, Bob, this was at Chatham House, or the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is a London think tank. There is an expression in common use in the English language called Chatham House rules. And that basically means that anything said at meetings in Chatham House can be reported but cannot be attributed. In other words, the person who says those lines shall not be named. Obviously, on this occasion, Chatham House rules did not apply because we have television coverage of the event. I understand it was live streamed. But Phil Goff, I think, just forgot where he was. And when New Zealand is in the situation it's in terms of trade, we export, $9 billion worth of goods to the United States. They're our second biggest export market. A lot of that is beef, high-quality beef, which gets mixed in with the grain-raised beef in the US to make the McDonald's hamburgers. So it's a very lucrative market for our beef farmers. And frankly, things are pretty delicate at the moment, with Donald Trump talking about 25% tariffs for all imported goods. So New Zealand's just got to watch itself. I'm sure that in Washington there will be New Zealand diplomats working very hard to ensure that our 25% tariff is not going to be applied and that we might get a little bit of special favour. So for the High Commissioner in London to make what frankly is a pretty snarky comment about Donald Trump at an occasion such as this, knowing that in 2025, the social media, the technology is going to pick it up and push it all around the world. I'm sure that already this particular comment has landed somewhere on a desk at the State Department in DC. So it was not a smart move by Phil Goff. And frankly, Winston Peters, who I understand is quite a good friend of Phil Goff's, they've worked together in the same parliament. He's really had no option but to give him the don't come Monday. So Phil Goff wakes up in a few hours, packing his bags back to Auckland, the end of a glorious diplomatic career.
Yeah, well, he's probably still asleep. He probably doesn't even realise he's been fired, maybe. But the media rushed off to Chris Hipkins, the leader of the opposition, I guess expecting that there would be some how dare Winston Peters do that? But to my surprise, Chris Hipkins actually agreed and said, look, you might be able to say that as a politician, but not as a diplomat. You've got to be a bit more diplomatic. And I mean, if it's Chatham House rules, I mean, do you think Phil Goff didn't realize it was being filmed, or that it was online, and maybe it was leaked? I mean, is there some mischievous story here that is going on?
I don't understand. I don't believe that, Bob. No, I've looked at the occasion today. Apparently, even though we use the expression Chatham House rule or Chatham House rules quite often in the English language as part of our vernacular, in other words, we don't say anything about what we heard at a particular meeting. I understand that on this occasion, and it happens quite often in meetings or gatherings at Chatham House, that the Chatham House rule does not apply. It's a bit of a throwback to an era gone by, I think, when the members of the Royal Institute for International Affairs sort of looked down their nose at each other over their gin and tonics, and no word to be said outside these walls, dear chap. But I think that changed, and obviously the fact that, I mean, Phil Goff surely would have seen the cameras there, and the fact that he was holding a microphone suggests that he must have known it was going to be streamed around the world and picked up very quickly, because these sorts of things didn't take long to get back to this side of the world, did it?
No, well, credit to Winston Peters for taking strong action. We'll come back to whether Chris Luxon would have taken such a strong action. Anyway, let's move on to the topic that I originally
pity Trevor Mallard hasn't said anything yet.
We could sack him as well. Look, it's taken the media off the focus of the thing that they really want to talk about the whole time, and that is these schools and lunches in schools. And Claire Trevette, who's a senior New Zealand Herald reporter, says, is David Seymour heading towards a fail mark on school lunches when small things turn into big headaches? And I mean, she does make the good point that actually neither National or ACT really wanted lunches in schools. They think it's a form of welfare that's sort of too broad. They'd prefer it to be targeted, but they've taken it on. They said they could fix it. And so, there's kind of this fail, but I did see this analysis, Peter, I'm not sure if you saw it, of Radio New Zealand's coverage. And basically, for the last 2.5 weeks, they've had a story every day, and they've also had an audio piece every second day. So the media are all over this issue. And then, of course, Luxon obviously got a bit rattled, I'd say, and said, look, if you don't like what we're serving up, put a Marmite sandwich and an apple in a bag, maybe put the onus back on parents. That's a unique idea. So then Stuff website decided to rush off and do a poll. And unfortunately, to Stuff's upset, they found that more than half said, yep, no, perfectly fine for kids to have a Marmite sandwich and an apple. 19% said, well, maybe some quinoa as well. Not just a Marmite sandwich. I did, just before you comment, Peter, I did think it was ironic that Chris Luxon mentioned Marmite, because that's owned by Sanitarium, which happens to be a charity that he wants to tax. So I did find that quite ironic. But anyway, can we just come back to
He wouldn't have known. He wouldn't have thought about that.
He should have said Vegemite, but then he would have got in trouble because it's Australian, isn't it? But anyway, why are the media so obsessed with this? I mean, it seems like they've got a target and this is all they can talk about.
Well, we hear a lot about Trump derangement syndrome. I think we've got school lunch derangement syndrome, particularly with the state-owned media, RNZ and TVNZ. I don't know what RNZ's coverage has been like, because, frankly, I gave up listening to RNZ some years ago. I watch a little of TVNZ News at 6, and they certainly have been obsessed with it. But I picked up the front page of my local paper, the Otago Daily Times, yesterday morning, and there's a piece in there from the new principal at East Otago High School, which is in the town of Palmerston on State Highway 1, about 40 minutes north of Dunedin. the new principal there. By the way, I should declare an interest here. My brother-in-law is the retiring deputy principal and was the acting principal for all of last year. Anyway, the new principal has arrived from Fiordland College in Taiana. And what was her line yesterday? She said something along the lines of Christopher Luxon is being disrespectful to my students and to students all around the country by saying they should have Marmite sandwiches. She said there are people in my town who haven't got anything to make a lunch from. Now, I'm sorry, I got so angry when I read that, because this woman is just either, maybe she was misquoted, but she's certainly so self-unaware, it's ludicrous. You can give a child $20 and a shopping list which includes a loaf of bread, a bit of butter, a pound of butter or 500 grams of butter, some spreads, and I don't know, maybe a pack of biscuits for a wee sweet treat, or maybe a pack of muesli bars. $20 will give you lunch for a week, and it would allow the child to learn a little bit of, shall we
appreciation.
Well, but also just to self-organization, parents perhaps to do a little bit of responsible parenting. I just get so annoyed when I'm ropeable about the fact that New Zealand is giving out school lunches anyway, because there is no poverty in New Zealand. There is no real poverty in New Zealand. The real poverty is a poverty of useless parenting. And I'm sorry, anybody who's on a variety of benefits, you still have enough to feed your children. Food is not expensive. It's about time. It is about getting organized. It is about putting the interests of your children, if not first, then certainly way up there, way ahead of the other financial commitments you think you're entitled to in your life. So feeding children is the responsibility of a parent. I get so annoyed that New Zealand went to this free school lunch bit. Apparently some charities started it. I got annoyed with Julie Chapman in an on-air discussion 5-6 years ago when she was running Kids Can. She still is running Kids Can and giving out the free lunches. And I put these things to her saying, it's really easy to make a school lunch. And she said, no, it's not. And I said, why not? And she basically made excuses for hopeless parents because they might have had drug issues, or they had to start work at 6 a.m. in a cleaning job, or had to work overnight in a cleaning job. I mean, Bob, I remember at primary school, and okay, I come from a middle-class family. My parents were school teachers, and we had really exciting Friday nights at our place back in the 1960s. We sat around the kitchen table after tea, and we cut and buttered and spread our sandwiches for 5 days for the following week. And then we put them in the freezer, wrapped them up in lunch wrap paper. Didn't have Glad wrap in those days. Wrapped it up in the greaseproof paper, put them in a plastic bag and put them in the freezer. I mean, I know some people did more exciting things on a Friday night than that, but that was the life that we led. Now, what I'm saying is it does not take much to make a lunch. Even now, when I am going out for a day, maybe I'm going to golf, or I'm going for a walk or something, going for a group bike ride. You know, you got to take your lunch. How long does it take to make your lunch, Bob? About 5 minutes. Spread a couple of sandwiches, put a muesli bar, put an apple, put a bottle of water in your bag, and hey presto. It's about organization, and I just get so annoyed that we have this cohort of useless parents, and more importantly, we have this cohort of useless politicians who just pander to the useless parents who say, oh, kids are going hungry, we've got to feed them. Let's educate the parents. Elwyn Pools had a great idea in some of his social media posts lately. He said we should have a ministry for parenting. I think you'd go along with that, wouldn't you?
Well, I used to take just very basic sandwiches as well. My mother gave me, in fact, sometimes just to punish me, she gave me cold mince, which was really yuck, or tomatoes that made all the bread soggy. So I think we've all got those horror stories.
That's child abuse, Bob. That's child abuse.
I mean, the media are focusing on the fact that some of the food isn't halal, or you know, it doesn't meet dietary restrictions.
Isn't that outrageous? This This woman at East Otago High School said our kids here got mac and cheese, which is the new way of saying macaroni cheese, mac and cheese 5 days in a row last week. Well, let's talk about macaroni cheese. Macaroni is carbohydrates, gives you energy. Cheese gives you protein. I mean, it's in many respects, it's the perfect meal, and it's filling, and it's pretty good for you. And kids, having just been away with a couple of my grandchildren on holiday, I can tell you that 11, 10-year-olds just love macaroni cheese. Those boys that I was with, my grandsons, they would scoff it all day long if they could. So what's wrong with macaroni cheese 5 days in a row? Kids love it.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that a targeted assistance to at-risk families that obviously have dysfunctional parents, maybe that's a solution. The solution that I thought, if they keep on complaining and the schools keep complaining, is to just say, okay, we've done it for $3 a day, therefore the allocation is $3 per student that needs that assistance. You can do it if you want to. I mean, let's face it, the state can never run anything that good, so it doesn't surprise me that the system hasn't gone that well. But we've figured out, well, actually you can provide a heated meal for $3 a day, so schools, if you really want to provide it, do it for $3 a day, and maybe then they'd think again. But you're right. I want to know what the kids are having over the 7 weeks of the Christmas break. I mean, are they not eating?
What about the Saturday and Sunday of every week when they finish school?
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Let's move on to the next topic. I thought this editorial from the New Zealand Herald was very interesting. Now, it was actually talking about, let me just find it. It was actually talking about the whole lunch in schools thing, because the media can't let go of this one. But there was a really interesting admission made by the New Zealand Herald in this. And it said, David Seymour has developed a knack of saying the right thing but delivering it in the wrong way. And then they segued from the lunch in schools to the Treaty Principles Bill. And they said, the Treaty's Principles Bill is a prime example of that. If you listen to what he is actually saying, this is the editors of the New Zealand Herald, it does have some merit and is worthy of an ongoing conversation at least. Knock me over with a feather. But because the words are coming from Seymour's mouth, a large section of New Zealanders can't hear the word through Seymour's political rhetoric. As New Zealand grows up as a nation, the time will come when a real nationwide conversation about the Treaty of Waitangi, where it sits in our past, present, and New Zealand's future, must be had. Now, like I said, Peter, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I read that, because in effect what they're saying is ignore the message, shoot the messenger. We just don't like the fact that it's coming out of David Seymour's brain. But in fact, what he's saying is correct. I mean, did the Herald say the quiet but out loud? I mean, was that a mistake?
Well, no, it wasn't a mistake. The intriguing thing about that particular piece is that I presume it was in the editorial section. That was the day's leader article, written as those articles usually are, anonymously. So there is a department of leader writers. It wasn't as if it was Claire Trevette, who I see has lost her job or is stepping down from her job pretty soon as part of the Herald cutbacks. It wasn't written by Thomas Coughlan or Jamie Ince or any of their other political reporters. This was written anonymously by one of their leader writers. So it possibly reflects what Murray Kirkness, the editor of the Herald, is thinking, and good for him. But the point about those particular articles is that how often are they read? How often are they really believed? Because there is no byline on them in this day of personality-driven journalism and activist journalism. You would probably read that and it would be consigned to the back of the mind. So I don't know how much impact it's going to have. It's absolutely correct, of course, absolutely correct. But maybe the editor's thinking now from that editorial might start drifting down to his political staff, and particularly with Ms. Trevette moving on. Coughlan, he's ex-stuff, isn't he? And has always struck me as being a pretty rational kind of political reporter. maybe if he takes over as the political editor, there'll be a softening of the Herald's attitude towards David Seymour.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was also an editorial earlier on saying actually that the police kind of coming down hard on youth crime and dealing with minor offences would stop them getting into a lifestyle of crime. And I thought, well, that was an interesting approach as well. I mean, that almost sounded like the New Zealand
So what you're
Herald
saying is that the Herald's gone all conservative. And of course, it's got a new, 9 and a bit% owner now. And there is some comment around today from Jim Grennan about what he intends to do with his shareholding and whether he's going to take it any further. But he's the man who runs the Centrist, the Canadian. He has conservative leanings. I'm just wondering what might happen if he starts to increase his shareholding, and will his particular kind of political thinking start to have an impact on the political reporting and on the editorial stance at the paper. So we shall see. It's intriguing times in the Herald. The NZME result was, the headline was they lost money, but in actual fact, their operating profit was about 50 million with some write-downs of some impairments. They had to report an $11 million loss. But operationally, their cash result was, I thought, pretty solid for a $200 million business. But Mr. Grennan's in to try and see what kind of influence he can have, I fear.
All right, let's just check some of the comments. Nancy Margaret says, school lunch derangement. Parents should feed your children. Francis survived on Marmite and an apple. Was always envious of my friend that had a mallow puff daily. In fact, my sister-in-law was a great baker and used to send my nephews with beautiful home baking every day, and they used to barter it every day for the stuff that kids had bought at the canteen. So they did very well. Charmaine says, surely the media are always looking to see the government fail. Aaron says, what a shame. The south of the South Island was the second to last common sense outpost. We've only got Central Otago left. That's that place without the McDonald's store, isn't it? Entity Kingdom says, just the lack of compassion for those working minimum age. Some 2 jobs paying to make landlords rich. No empathy. But then Rabbit Hole says, Kiwis have support in many areas. There's still those who are lower socioeconomic status. They can access resources. And Catherine says, we have family tax credits for children accommodation, supplements for low-income earners. The list of help goes on and on. All right, let's move on. The question is Luxon losing the room? And it came about not only because... Actually, I want to play this video clip to you because I don't think we've discussed this. It's this clip of Luxon having an interview with Mike Hosking on News Talk ZB, and it's about Andrew Bailey, who touched another staff member. There must have been some argy-bargy. He felt he should stand down, and Luxon was simply asked by Mike Hosking, well, if he hadn't have stepped down, would you have sacked him? That's all he wanted, a yes or a no. And it just went on and on. Let me just show you a clip, because as a media person, I'm interested to see what's going on here.
Sacked him if he hadn't offered to resign. Well, hypothetical, he did resign. No, I know that, but just answer the question. Well, would you have sacked him?
Well, he didn't meet the expectations of a minister.
So was it a sackable offence?
Well, I think given how clear we'd been on the first incident about what
why
the
can't you
expectations...
just answer the question? Well, see, this is why you get yourself reputationally in so much trouble. Would you have sacked him? Yes or no?
I can say to you he didn't meet the expectations I have of ministers.
So you would have sacked him?
I didn't need to because he resigned.
See what you're doing here? I don't...
well, no, but you're talking about a specific case, right?
Yeah, would you have said... Look,
have I done a good job of laying down expectations of my ministers?
Yeah, but
yes, crystal clear.
But the next step is really simple. If he hadn't... I'm glad he offered to resign, because I tell you what, if he didn't, I would have sacked him.
He wouldn't have met my expectations as a minister.
Why?
Yep.
And it goes on for 2.5 minutes. I mean, is that the first time you've seen it? I saw you chuckling there. Is that the first time?
It is actually, Bob. I was overseas
painful.
when it happened. Yeah, well, it's embarrassing, but I read about it, and it doesn't surprise me, because from the first time I saw Christopher Luxon in a public situation at a public meeting, when was that, in Wanaka in 2023, I think? No, 2022. He'd just become the leader. He would be amongst the more unimpressive political orators and speakers that I've ever heard. You'll like this, Bob. I've been invited today, this very day, to both a lunch and a dinner with Christopher Luxon. He's down in this part of the world. He was in Cromwell at lunchtime at the Highlands Motorsport Park for a business lunch. $110 a head plus gist. No, thank you. And then tonight he's at a private dinner in Wanaka that I was also invited to at a price. And I said, no, thank you as well. I mean, if I'm in the same room as him, I don't think I could contain myself, because I think he is just useless. And the sooner he is rolled, the better for the country, the better for the National Party.
Okay, well, what really sort of got things talking, and it was mainly around social media, the legacy media have totally ignored it, but we published a letter where a childcare reliever wrote to the Prime Minister and said, look, I've been a childcare reliever for the last 5 years. I've had several kids below the ages of 5 approach me in childcare centres saying they are not male or female and that they are identifying as they, them, he, she. These are vulnerable young children who know no better and are only saying it because of what they have seen or heard from TV or older people around them. What is your plan to change this? I, for one, know that whatever they say, I will fight against it as a caring woman of God. Well, she got back this response, which basically said, Christopher is a proud supporter of the LGBTQI plus community and wants New Zealand to be a country that celebrates and supports diversity, including our rainbow community. Now, in fairness, that was a form letter that was just fired off because obviously the letter triggered a certain word. I'm not sure what the word was in the letter that triggered this letter, but it just seems completely tone deaf, and it's horrified people online, especially around social media, because it's not even dealing with the issue of gender indoctrination, gender ideology indoctrination, even in preschools, so that we're confusing kids as to whether they're a boy or a girl. And it just seems like when you combine that also with some other issues, like, for example, how he did a nice 1-minute video for Ramadan with Mark Mitchell there looking like a hostage, it's talking about all the great qualities, and for Christmas it was just kind of like, well, we made it through the year, well done. Didn't mention a single aspect of Christmas and the significance. I don't know, it just seems like Christopher Luxon is starting to lose the room. Is that your impression? I mean, I know you've already said that you've got no time for him, but do you think he's losing the vote room as well?
Of course he is. Of course he is. I don't know where his support in caucus is coming from. He has negative net favourables. So in other words, he's got net unfavourables in terms of those who like what he's doing and those who don't like what he's doing. The problem, as has often been the case with the National Party, well, ever since Simon Bridges was rolled, is who is a viable alternative. We thought we had many high hopes for Judith Collins back in 2020, and that ended disastrously. I don't think she's going to come back. I see the next leader of the National Party actually as Simeon Brown. I don't know how far away that is. I understand he is gathering very good kudos from his colleagues, particularly with some of the work he's done in, first of all, in transport, and now looks to be making serious progress in health. And that's to be commended, because health has always been a poison chalice. In fact, one of the theories going around was that the boy wonder, Simeon, was given health because everybody fails as a health minister, and therefore Simeon's just getting a bit too big for his boots with all the wins he's had in other portfolios. So therefore we'll put him into health and, let him come back to the level of everybody else. But he seems to be making very good progress in health as well, particularly in some of the programs. I note today was bowel cancer screening, Bob.
Yep.
He's reduced the age of that and done away with the Maori Advantage as well. So previously, I think you were 60, you got bowel cancer screening, but if you were Maori or Pacific Islander, you got it at 50. If you're in that 50 to 58 age group as a Maori or PI person, you'll continue to be able to have that testing. But from now on, it's non-ethnic. Everybody at the age of 58 will get the bowel cancer screening. Now, that's the kind of political move and health move that will win Simeon Brown serious points. He's been a bit soft on both the trans issue, the transgender issue. And he's also been soft on Maori and Pacific Island Advantage in terms of medical school admissions. But I think that if he was the leader of the party and was somebody who was absolutely certain of his position. I think that if he became the leader, you would see the National Party move back to what we always thought the National Party should be. Centre-right with a good, strong family conservative value. I'm sorry, at the moment, Christopher Luxon is just not providing that. I always think back to the time when he was Chief Executive of Air New Zealand, Bob, and he was the chair of Jacinda Ardern's Business Council, wasn't he? So he was aligned with the Labour government then. I just wonder whether, in fact, he would have found a more natural home as a politician in the Labour Party, because he's certainly not a National Party politician in my book.
Yeah, well, Simeon Brown is pro-life, and he voted against the ridiculous conversion therapy law. Went against the kind of
I
narrative of the party.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's a little bit like J.D. Vance with the young family. Just comes across as very normal. Just actually that segues into the. I want to discuss actually Simeon dealing with the media. So we'll jump a topic, but just before we do that, just credit to Christopher Luxon on one thing. He's obviously watching our programs, because we did say, well, with this beautiful statement that he did for Ramadan, where he got in front of the camera, has he done anything for Ash Wednesday yesterday in the beginning of Lent? And lo and behold, later on that day, he sent out this little message here. Talks about bringing you closer to your faith, not our faith. So that's interesting, but few people picked that up. But at least he put out a statement. And then his hostage, from the previous video, Mark Mitchell, came out with a video today. Actually, I may not have loaded that one. Anyway, Mark Mitchell earlier today did an extended Lent one. And I think Mark Mitchell is Catholic, so felt it was important to do that video. So obviously they're listening anyway. So just thought we'd put that in, that we're being watched by the echelons of power. Now, you mentioned Simeon and...
Just one thing though, Bob.
Yeah.
Just one thing about that message about Lent. Lent, Ash Wednesday, it's a Christian festival, isn't it? I understand.
40 days of Lent leading up to Easter.
Yes, I'm not being cynical here. It's a Christian festival. Why not, at some stage in that message, use the word Christian? Maybe brings you closer to your Christian faith. I mean, what other faith? It's not as if Islam is celebrating Lent or Hinduism is celebrating Lent. It's it's a Christian festival. Why not mention the word? Or is that one of those words that you're not allowed to use anymore?
Maybe not. Actually, I think I've got Mark Mitchell's one. Let's just see if it's this one.
This time of the year holds great significance as we begin the season of Lent. I want to acknowledge the special time for our Christian communities across the country. For billions of people worldwide, Lent is a time of reflection, sacrifice and spiritual renewal, leading up to the celebration of Easter. It's a time where faith, family and community come together. Lent also reminds us of the values that unite us, values like compassion, humility and service. This year, Pope Francis's Lenten message reminds us that journeying together means consolidating our unity and walking side by side, while ensuring no one is left behind or feels excluded. It calls us to reaffirm our shared commitment to each other, whether it's through acts of charity, shared prayers, or simply supporting one another. To everyone observing Lent, I encourage you to embrace this season with a spirit of hope and purpose as we look forward to Easter.
Oh, Mark Mitchell for Prime Minister. That sealed the deal. Okay, but anyway,
at least
we got
deputy
this.
to Simeon Brown.
Yes. Okay, well, let's have a look at Simeon, because I did want to cover this particular issue. He's been talking about the health workers. He's been wanting to train up more, and the media were saying, well, the Public Service Association has done a survey on health worker stress, and the PSA is headed by Fleur Fitzsimmons, who's a former Labour candidate who lost a fairly safe Labour seat, Wellington's Rongotai, to Julianne Genter, a Green who should never win a single seat in her life. But anyway, it was sent to 90,000 health workers and just 1,300 responded, 1,300 out of 90,000. So anyway, Simeon appears before the media and he's tackled on this issue. Just have a watch at his response, because I think he's shaping up to be a pretty classy politician to clap back at the media.
Record funding and health. You may have seen the survey from the PSA today, where the overwhelming response from health workers was that the front line is suffering, and that the Bank was cut by 13 frontline services.
Well, look, that's from the PSA union, led by a failed Labour Party candidate who couldn't even win her safe Labour Party seat. Come on. Ultimately, we have invested record investment in frontline services. 6,500 more frontline staff working in Health New Zealand over the last 2 years. There's over 2,000 more nurses. We've invested significantly in frontline services, and we will continue to do so. And that's where we want the investment, not in the bureaucracy. And the Public Service Association represents the bureaucracy. So I accept that they are doing what unions do, but they are led by a failed Labour Party candidate who is simply just trying to oppose what this government is trying to do to make healthcare more accessible for Kiwis.
It's not just the union, right? It's their members, their workers. 4 out of 5 health.
Look, and I think they had about 1,000 responses from there's like 90,000 people work for Health New Zealand. It's a very small number of people and a self-selected survey. So all I'd say is that there's the PSA union doing what the PSA union does. We're here talking about the good things this government is doing, investing in healthcare, hiring more doctors and nurses, focusing on frontline service delivery. That's what matters to Kiwis.
What do you give him as a media expert, Peter, out of 10? What do you give him?
That's impressive. That was very impressive. And that's one of the reasons why I'm backing him for higher honours, as they say. Very composed, virtually all the facts at his fingertips, and numbers which I understand are irrefutable. Health is one of those thankless tasks. You could put the entire GDP into the health budget and it still wouldn't be enough. But the fact that there are 2,000 more nurses, the fact that those nurses are being paid at the top of the scale something like $125,000 a year, the fact that there is more space now in the medical schools, these are good initiatives, and it's about an extra $5 billion a year going into the health budget. That's good work. That's very good work. It's never going to be enough. But people talk about the health crisis. You can only tell your personal stories. And I certainly, even at my advanced age, where you find yourself, unfortunately, going to get medical care more often than you'd want to, in my little neck of the woods where, they're battling to get frontline primary carers, the doctors and nurses, I never have an issue getting an appointment. So maybe we're just a healthier lot down here and don't go to the doctor as often.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think we better shift down there.
Yeah, so I just don't. I think it's like the school lunch thing. There's the media beat up and let's bash the government over the health services because you get a whole lot of easy hits, and then you get a minister like that who pushes back against the press gallery pack, hunting as one. I say good for him.
Okay, let's just jump back that topic that we did jump over, and I know you'll love this one because it's the media talking about themselves and how they need funding. It's that station that you listen to all the time, Radio New Zealand, state funded, and they do a thing called Media Watch, which is where they I think they navel gaze. They watch themselves and don't really critique of it and tackle them a number of times on some of their coverage. But anyway, they made this statement as part of why we need to fund the media. It's made by the chief executive of Radio New Zealand, and he says, quote, "Public media should exist in a plural media environment, but there is evidence out there that shows it doesn't really disadvantage commercial players." Rubbish. "When there is support, whether that's public funding, public support, or even political support for an independent public broadcaster, it really shows that there is a care for democracy." Peter, what is it about the media that always says that if they don't exist in the form they want and get copious amounts of government funding, that somehow democracy is going to die in a vacuum when all of us have switched off anyway and are getting our media source at other places and doing quite well? Thank you very much.
Well, I can tell you, Bob, that after working full-time in the media for the best part of 50 years, nobody thinks themselves more important than people who work in the media. And those in the public media seem to be a step up the snob ladder above those of us who worked in the commercial media. Well, I did towards the end of my time anyway. I suppose I was in the public media for all that time at TVNZ, even though it was publicly owned, and it was there most of the time to make a profit for the government. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But I've subsequently come to the belief, since I've left the business, and particularly with the technology developments that we've seen really only in the last 5 years, the way it has become so easy to set up online radio stations, online video channels. I really don't believe the government should be in the media game. They don't own newspapers. Why the heck should they own radio stations and a television network? Well, in fact, it's what, TV1, TV2, plus 2 Maori channels. So they actually own 4 television networks and 2 radio networks. And the Concert FM is the biggest rort of all. I mean, frankly, that should be coming out of a computer. But there are people who like classical music who believe that their announcers should be live all the time. I mean, it's just
haven't they heard of
absolute
Spotify?
Snobbery. Sorry?
Yeah. Haven't they heard of Spotify?
Well, that's right. Haven't they heard of the next gen broadcast system as well, whereby you can pre-record all your announcements, as they do most of the time at ZM or More FM, anytime after 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning on Coast, all those music stations. That's all pre-recorded. There's not much live on those commercial music stations. I don't know why it should be on Concert FM.
Okay, bit of a disturbing story. This one is that despite the change in the government, who promised that they would deal with the whole gender ideology in schools, they still have on the official Ministry of Education website that if kids want to have preferred names, preferred pronouns and gender markers, and of course they've got 112 genders to choose from, they're told, and 200 plus sexualities, that in fact this information should still be kept secret from parents if that's what the child asks. Now this is guidelines that are in all schools, so it's primary and intermediate as well as high school. Peter, it suggests that although we were promised that we would get rid of the extremities of the Labour Greens coalition and Te Pāti Māori when the government changed, nothing has really changed. Relationships, sexuality, education. I mean, Rodney Hyde was standing outside his school because the board wouldn't let him share his concerns about the radical aspects of RSE. That hasn't changed. Sure, they've removed it, but they haven't replaced it with anything. So schools are just operating in a void, and radical schools are just continuing with what they are doing. Inside Out is still going into schools and still being funded by the government. And as we can see here, the Prime Minister is a big supporter of LGBTQI apparently, and that's how he responds to parents who are concerned about this type of ideology confusing our own kids. So has anything really changed since the government changed? And look, dare I ask, where is New Zealand First and ACT in all of this?
Well, that's a very good question. Winston's too busy firing high commissioners to London. Seymour's too busy fighting fires with the school lunches. So, I mean, in many respects, the most disturbing thing about that caption, that screenshot you had there, is that still we have in the headline of the Ministry of Education, Te Kawanatanga o Aotearoa, with New Zealand government in the small print. I was under the impression that part of the coalition agreement was that it should be English first. And here we go, Tahurangi, New Zealand curriculum. Shouldn't it be New Zealand curriculum, Tahurangi? I mean, just a small thing, but it's as if the coalition agreements don't matter. And sadly, Winston and Seymour appear to be very dominant personalities inside their parties, and maybe they've been distracted and don't regard this as a major issue. I don't know how big a deal it is. I'm not a parent of school-aged children anymore. I am a grandfather, but my grandchildren are not going to a school near where I live, so I don't know what kind of content they have from their classrooms.
Yeah.
But a coalition agreement, I would have thought, is a coalition agreement. And we've got, I mean, it's just like the reaction to the Cass report. We've got the useless Minister of Mental Health, Matt Ducey, with a very, shall we say, intriguing background, questionable background, working at the Tavistock Clinic in London. He appears to be a favourite of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, as we've seen, is not prepared to get his hands dirty on any messy issue, whether it be this, whether it be the Treaty Principles Bill. So it's just weak leadership on all fronts, and it's so annoying. And that's why I'd really like to see a leader of the National Party who is a good centre-right Conservative with some strong moral values. It would make quite the difference to me.
Yeah. All right. We have got time for one more topic. We've been doing fantastically, and I actually sent this image to Simon O'Connor, who's travelling overseas at the moment, to say, is this creative or not? So we're talking about Adrian Orr, the Reserve Bank Governor, who's just resigned. Is he awful or awesome? Ka-ching. But, I mean, Peter, probably most people just sort of switch off when they hear about the Reserve Bank and what they're up to, although we should be concerned because it affects interest rates and therefore mortgage rates. I'm interested just to hear very quickly, because the media are talking about it today, so we probably should just touch on it. The thing I noticed about Adrian Orr was that apparently there's been a number of stories of bullying in the bank while he's been there. There's been a refusal to admit errors. There's been a near tripling of staff members in the Reserve Bank. Operating expenditure has gone from 70 million to 186 million since 2016. So that's just in 8 years. And this is the bit that really gets me. This is when I knew things were not too good at the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank last year announced it was hiring a principal diversity, equity and inclusion advisor, offering prospective employees the chance to embed Te Ao Māori lens across policy, processes and systems. This is the Reserve Bank doing interest rates, by the way, and inflation. Utilise gender and ethnic pay gap analyses and communicate with credibility the linkage between proposed DEI initiatives, organisational strategies and the benefits to organisations in a variety of fora. I'm hoping that maybe Trump rang him and said, you're fired, too much DEI. But anyway, what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on Adrian Orr? And you'll probably have to speak in very simple words because most of us are pretty thick when it comes to fiscal policy and Reserve Bank stuff.
I'll give you the tip. I'm not much of an expert on economic matters myself, Bob. All I will say is that in a past life, I knew Don Brash, nice, quiet man when he was the Reserve Bank Governor. It was about inflation and not much more. I knew Alan Bollard when he was chair of the Commerce Commission, nice guy, then went on to become the governor of the Reserve Bank. I briefly knew Graham Wheeler when he played cricket for Wellington back in the 1980s. Quiet, understated man who became governor of the Reserve Bank. And those guys, in their time in the role, and obviously Don has achieved probably more political prominence since he left the governor's role through the other jobs that he's had. But when he was the governor of the Reserve Bank, you hardly heard a squeak out of him. Same with Alan Bollard, certainly with Graham Wheeler. There must be one or two others along the way as well whose names you'll see signed on the Reserve Bank. So I guess what I'm saying is that Orr, who had been pretty prominent in economic circles in New Zealand before he took on the job, he'd been the Westpac chief economist, which I think is where I first heard of him, probably the best part of 20 years ago. Then he ran the New Zealand Super Fund. The man actually took a pay cut from the Super Fund to become the governor of the Reserve Bank. So we knew then the job was really, in many respects, about ego. And the empire building that has gone on has been quite staggering. And that's before you look at some of the policies that he's enacted, borrowed way too many bonds, lost at a ridiculously low interest rate. Interest rates go up, so we lost 10 billion there. Flooded the country with money, meant that people had hugely inflated house prices. A lot of people cashed up. A lot of people got burnt. And our inflation went up to, 5%, 6%. So, okay, we're getting back to a bit of normality now. And you put that all on top of the empire building that's been going on inside the institution. It's just staggering that he's lasted this long. He should never have been reappointed by Robertson. And if he was going to be reappointed in 2022, about a year out from the election, it should have been a short-term appointment with the option for another, say, a 2-year appointment with the option for another 3 if there was a change of government. So it doesn't surprise me that he's gone. It's been quite a good week for the government in terms of, scalps, hasn't it? You got rid of Adrian Orr, you got rid of Phil Goff. Who's next?
There was someone else as well. There's been a couple in the health sector that they got rid of.
That was a while ago, wasn't it? Safati, Diana Safati, the Director General of Health, and Margiapa as the Chief Executive of Health New Zealand went as well, but that was a week or so ago. But Orr is, I never met the guy, but it seems to me that he was just way too prominent, and he was, in some of his media appearances, very arrogant and very dismissive of people that he didn't regard as having the same, shall we say, academic knowledge as him about economics. But then you read good, clear, concise economic writing from the likes of Rob McCulloch and Mike Riddell, you understand that Adrian Orr was not that crash hot. So it doesn't surprise me that he's gone.
No. All right, we are well out of time. Peter, really appreciate you being our guest panellist for this week. We will let you get back to the garden, and maybe as a special treat, you can have some McDonald's down at Wanaka tonight as a thank you from us. We'll send you some vouchers if you can find the McDonald's store.
Stop it, Bob. I think that was one of the great planning decisions made in New Zealand history. It was just fantastic.
New Zealand is open for business except in Wanaka. I can't even get a quarter pounder.
No, we're absolutely open for business in Wanaka, and the town is booming. It just doesn't need fatty, greasy, litter-filled McDonald's wrappers all around town, okay?
I can't see anything wrong with it anyway. Peter, you have a great night. Thank you for being on. And to you watching, a lot of you online at the moment, thank you for watching. We will be back next Thursday night. I think Simon will be back in the house, so we will check that. But anyway, have a great night. Thanks for watching.